You were telling me strategy with clients, right? How you identify the core problem that you're solving, right? Between,
Addressing the pain or bringing great joy.
in reference to the beacon concept, we're identifying that this is solving a pain, right? There's an alleviation of the feeling of loneliness.
If you want to get investors, then you have to have an idea what people are willing to pay for that product. Number of users times willingness to pay equals potential revenue.
Sure. And then you factor in customer acquisition costs.
I'm not saying you necessarily need to discuss profitability, just how much revenue can you bring.
Not even total addressable market at that point.
The tricky thing is, what is the willingness to pay? Right? I think that's the challenge figuring out. Like in the case of Beacon,
In the case of Beacon,
trying to understand what's one's willingness to pay.
during the conversation yesterday with Fabrice, his immediate response to that was that it would seem like a subscription model.
A subscription model tells you the means by which you can left the money, but it doesn't tell you how much money people are willing to give you.
I think there are many ways to monetize the inception point of a connection with somebody else.
So then the customer becomes someone other than the two people who are new.
That's correct. So let's say that we add another layer and we make it that it's two people that have never met to go to a place that they have never been. So we're offering suggestions to get them to walk into a new place to have an experience on us. Go to this coffee shop. You guys have never been there. The coffee's on us. Now, is there value to bringing new customers into a coffee shop so they feel like they've discovered something new? They've entered into a new space.
Roughly speaking, that's kind of a fundamental component of the appeal of Groupon.
Yes, Groupon is a nice sub-comp in this scenario.
Businesses were interested in investing in getting new types of customers through their doors when they otherwise not have been able to reach out to. But then there was that problem where once the special deal was over, they didn't return for more business.
That's correct.
And so I think the concern would be they come in this one time because they get caught, but then will they return?
That could all depend on the experience, though, also.
But then that still leads you back to the initial question, which is, what is the customer's willingness to pay?
That's right.
The customer is someone different now, right? It's now maybe the business, but we still have to wonder what their willingness to pay.
If you leverage the businesses against each other to some degree, we've never met. We decide to use Beacon. We accept our requests. We find that we have a lot of things in common. There are 10 coffee shops within a 1 mile radius of wherever we happen to be. The app is going to send us to this suggested place first versus these other places. We're already going to provide the list. Where do you want to rank on that list?
You would think that the cost of the drink, if their willingness to pay is higher than that, then they're going to be really satisfied to get a drink. But what if their willingness to pay is lower than the value of the drink? We're like, okay, but the drink is free, but they need to give up time, they need to figure out transport, and they need to, it's almost like a little bit of a gamble, right? What if I don't like the person who I match with to get a drink?
That's right.
And so it's important to make sure that the value of the experience offered exceeds all of those costs and then even if they're not the main quote-unquote consumer or user of the product.
What's next in the strategy with clients when you're talking about it?
So I think the next step is to figure out who will actually be the main consumer of the product, what is their willingness to pay, and how do you optimize the design of the product to make it far more valuable to them than their willingness to pay.
How does your intuition feel about a concept like Beacon? One benchmark being reaching the $20,000 a month MRR. Another would be finding 1,000 users that use your product every day.
To a certain extent, it depends on their willingness to pay.
But one thing that I intend to do and that I've learned is to not try to do everything at once and not try to appeal to everybody right away. Did Fabrice yesterday reference Instagram as why they became so big? Because it was so simple for everybody to do. Yeah.
You do want to focus on your niche, but you also want your niche to have an incredible number of people in it.
Thinking about testing it at, say, like a big college football game. One, download the app, two, use it to connect with somebody.
You need to take into account whether that test environment will give you the data that you need to validate your hypothesis.
Do people continue to use it after the event?
So it sounds like what you want to test is what type of place is the best place for people to have their initial interaction with the platform. So you're saying if people learn about the platform at a college football game and try it there, do they continue on to be users of the product over time? It's also important to make sure you're asking the right questions so you're not getting the right answer to the wrong questions. And then once you've established that, oh, people really like this app, then you can talk about what's the best way for them to have their initial experience with that. I think Fabrice told you something along the lines of how important it is to find your first 1,000 users.
He did.
Maybe what's important is to first find 1,000 people that need something and then get them what they need.
The inception of Beacon came from going as an individual to large conferences and not leaving with the right contacts, not finding the right connections, sometimes feeling socially awkward. So, and I'm a very social individual, right? Arriving alone, leaving alone, navigating alone, living alone, eating meals alone, drinking alone, and also witnessing many other people going throughout the motions of their day the same. Going to coffee houses or restaurants and seeing a lot of people at tables alone.
I think it would be important to have conversations with those people to confirm that they're having the same experience so that we can get a sense of how big of an issue this is and how big your potential user base is.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of statistics and there's a lot of proof in successful applications. I mean, take something like the success of Headspace or Calm. Take the success of AI, right, and ChatGPT. All of a sudden, we're being trained to have conversations with artificial intelligence. That's what the new commercials for Google Gemini are all about. It's about individual people living alone, different walks of life, conferring with their artificial intelligence. That's the marketing campaigns.
The thing is, you've used the word success, but what are the metrics that are measuring that success?
What, they reached 100 million users before any other app in the history or technology in the history of the world. And their valuation, they're raising in the hundreds of billions of dollars. That's another success metric.
You have people that are gainfully employed. That's by definition one of the best segments
That's right.
of the population to be working with.
I heard it yesterday. Again, purchasing power. I exist in this world just by helping other people feel a sense of value and purpose in their own selves. And then that value is reciprocated to me because they want me to be around. That's the underlying thing that I really think Beacon can have the most, it can do the most social good, is by, let's say in a hypothetical ideal situation, Beacon works. People are connecting all over the place. And then all of a sudden, when you step outside your building in New York City, you're saying hi to strangers that you had a coffee with. And you're not just walking past them, staring at a screen with your earphones on and pretending like you are completely isolated from this individual because they might not meet your prejudiced criteria of who you can say hello to. That's what I keep thinking is the real core value here. Is when you come home to your building, maybe you've met 10 new people in your building because of a technology like Beacon. Because you found that somebody on the 3rd floor, you're on the 5th floor, is just like you or very similar. and you do similar things, and you had no idea that the both of you lived 30 feet away from each other for the last 10 years. That's what the technology's for. So when you come home, maybe you coordinate with that person that you're going to arrive at the same time and sit down and have another coffee, you know?
The thing is, Beacon can only grow to the point where it can deliver those experiences and the features necessary to facilitate those features if it has the revenue coming in necessary to employ the developers to build those features and to finance the marketing necessary to let
To
people
reach
know
the
that it
audiences.
exists. Yeah.
That's right.
So I think what may not be immediately obvious is the fact that people who develop the initial concept for a product do not ultimately get to decide how that product is used, right? It's the users who will dictate exactly what they want and how they will use it. And then the people developing that product can either adapt it to meet the user's needs or the product will fade away.
That's why we have to do small sample size test markets. Test it in one building, one arena, one conference, one hostel, right, at a time. We need proof of concept. Can it work in 2 or 3 or 4 core closed environments? And then can we extract it from there? Well, I want to build it. And I want to find people that believe in the concept, that want to put forth a little bit of money so we can at least develop an MVP and do a test on one market and see what people think.
So I think what you should aim to do is identify what the most important question is and build an MVP optimized to validate your hypothesis regarding that question.
Can the question be, does anybody want a free beer?
Like, if that was all the product was ultimately designed to serve,
Yeah.
that it would be fine if that was the question.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's ultimately the only function that the app is supposed to have.
One of the big pushbacks I got yesterday was people don't care that much about making new friends. I tried to clarify that this isn't necessarily about friendship per se. It's just more about self-confidence in feeling like when I go out there, I have a large variety of interests, as do you, right? If the people around us had the opportunity to pick up on those signals that we would be projecting, I believe that I would move through life feeling more confident that at any time the possibilities are exponentially expanded.
What you would need in order to quote unquote justify investing in this project is to be able to say, I know at least 1,000 people want this, and I know at least 1,000 people will do this. It is at that point where you know, okay, it makes sense to invest in an MVP because I know that there are at least 1,000 people who want this. Let me understand how I can get them onto the platform and start delivering the solution that they've been looking for.
So when creating a pitch for a crowdfunding campaign, what I will then do is ask the question, is this something that would help you? The product doesn't have to necessarily be relevant to the individual. The individual just has to believe that it's going to be relevant to enough people that the company's going to make money and that their investment is going to transform into profit.
That would suggest that the people who invest in the app via Refunder could be very different than the people who would most benefit from that.
Totally.
In which case, you're going to have a slightly different mission when it comes to how we discuss the product for the purposes of a Refunder.
I'm actually a really lonely person underneath the surface. Even though I socialize with so many people, I still am not finding the right connections. I'm not finding my place in the world. I'm still out there searching, and I believe that there's a better way to conduct this search. There's a better way, and it all comes down to the underutilization of this device. I'm not finding it on social media. I'm not finding it on all my LinkedIn outreach that I do. I'm not finding it in cold emails to investors. I'm not, it's not happening.
if you can say all of that again, but say, I know 1,000 people in this situation, I know 10,000 people who feel this way. There's data that show that there are 100,000 people who want to do what I have in mind, then that's a different story.
And there is a lot of data to support that, because if you look at, let's just take remote work, for example. You work from home, you're far less likely to go out for happy hour at 5 o'clock. And there are how many people working from home now?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a difference between knowing that there are a lot of lonely people and knowing that those lonely people will seek to address that issue in the same way that you envision addressing it.
That's actually very insightful, and I agree. And I appreciate that sentiment. It can be too easy to get, stuck in a particular vision of how a perfect world would look. Thanks for that. I think you're right. Sometimes when I meet a stranger, I like to ask them questions and just listen to their story. That's what I'm hoping that the value proposition is in the end. Is that, yes, does it empower people with more confidence, but also the ability to pay closer attention and listen to the people around them and their opinions. You're somebody that I connected with. You're a friend. We met organically in the real world. Was there technology involved? Yeah, right? It was a technology meetup. And it was sponsored, it was promoted through an application. It worked for us. I've attended a lot of them, and so have you. Have you made a lot of real friends?
I've made some good friends. I think it kind of has to do with where I am in my journey for finding new friends. I've got a lot of friends whom I wish I could do a better job of keeping up with.